Far-left ideologues have thrown out a number of arguments against the pipeline, backed by millions of dollars in misleading advertising in an attempt to shroud their real motives. In reality, their opposition is purely based on the fact they oppose all forms of fossil fuel energy. Let's take apart a few of the arguments against the pipeline one at a time. First, the radical left argues the construction of the pipeline would mean more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And that's just simply false. A recent study from the Cambridge Energy Research Associates showed the pipeline will have no material impact on greenhouse gas emissions. If this pipeline isn't constructed, Venezuela heavy crude would fill the void in U.S. markets and would have a far worse carbon footprint. This argument about increased greenhouse gas is interesting but completely false. Second, the radical left tries to argue that much of the oil being shipped south on the pipeline will be exported and not used for domestic purposes. Now, this is just silly. It's a classic example of left-wing ideology attempting to distort the free markets. First off, exports of crude oil have, for the most part, been banned by the United States Congress for more than 30 years. U.S. refined exports of diesel and gasoline have risen in recent years, mainly due to depressed U.S. demand because of our recession. Refiners have simply made the decision to export more refined product instead of lowering output domestically, which, by the way, would have led to layoffs at American companies. It is, of course, a good thing we're exporting this refined product. We're decreasing our trade deficit. The bulk of our exports go to Canada, Mexico, and Brazil, all countries we import crude oil from. So now think about this. We're exporting refined product. That means we're importing raw material, adding value to it, and selling it at a higher price, which helps our economy. That's a win-win, and it is great for America. Third, this is a real head-scratcher. Keystone opponents claim that construction of the pipeline will not create jobs. In fact, over the summer, President Obama derided the number of jobs that would be created as a blip in the U.S. job market. He said there was no evidence there would be substantial job growth. I think this is a fairly bizarre argument considering the fact that his own U.S. State Department recently came out with a report saying construction of the pipeline would create over 40,000 jobs. This employment bump could potentially mean approximately over $2 billion in increased earnings. Even labor unions disagree with left-wing opponents of pipeline construction, saying construction would create at least 20,000 high-wage jobs for their members. Every reputable study shows that job creation from building the pipeline would be significant. Some studies saying as many as 100,000 jobs could be created. Again, like all the other arguments against the pipeline, I find this one to be completely false. I could go on dismembering the left's arguments here, and I certainly did that recently in a speech I gave to the Canadian Oilmen's Executive Association, but it isn't worth the time. Suffice it to say that the left's opposition to the Keystone is not based on science or facts. It's simply an article of their faith.